It's your apologies and your explanations, together with my colleagues, I'm sure are well noted. It's this visit, somehow we've come to do it almost annually. It's unless it changes and we decide to do it more than once in a year. We are hoping that when we come around again over 2014 budget, we'll meet the DG budget and his directors and everyone else who is part of their team seated. I mean, it's only to be expected anyway. Of course, as you are aware, the House of Representatives is currently on a working recess, more or less. All the standing committees are in the field, doing oversight, as driven by their various mandates on the implementation of the 2013, appropriation. Our visit here is in connection with that. By the time standing committees return, by the time the House gets back to plenary next week, the various standing committees are expected to be presenting reports of what their findings are from their oversights. And as the Committee on Appropriation, will be required to be standby, providing explanations and clarifications, as would arise from the various reports from standing committees. Because we directly oversight your office, which is the budget office of the Federation, and because this office is very strategic in terms of even the implementation of the budget itself, we are expected as a committee to be on top of all the issues and all the information that is necessary and required. Because various MDAs won't spend money unless your office releases that money. This office appears to be actually the beginning point in terms of providing the base information. The various standing committees are going to discover in the course of their work various, different scenarios, from the implementing agencies on the budget. But I think what information that we take from here is going to be, a reference point, to cross-check whatever the various standing committees, would be reporting. Towards this visit, the committee had formally written to your office, calling attention to a few of the things that we will expect. We'll expect a brief on the 2013 budget performance generally. What amount of releases have been made first, second, and third quarter. We'll just be getting into the fourth quarter from next week. In our last visit, you will recall that we had made a case for the fact that, especially for the fourth quarter, that releases be made on time, so that various MDAs can actually tidy up their work before the end of the year. And then, outside what releases may have been made, what is it that has been cash backed? We had indicated that we would like to have a presentation that, is as detailed as providing us information, MDA by MDA, agency by agency, to be able to do a follow-up and to be able to assist our committees, our standing committees. You'd also appreciate the fact that because we also directly oversight this office, we'd also like to have a brief on the budget performance of the budget office of the Federation, in terms of how much monies, was approved in the budget and how much has been released. We would like to take particular notice of the volume and amount of capital releases, because we discover that with recurrent expenditure, almost always, the releases and implementation is up to date. What continues to suffer really is the capital component. So we'll actually expect that we'll be given these. We are in addition also required that we'd like to have these presentations in copies, just so that our colleagues can follow up with whatever briefings, can follow the briefings that are going to be going on. These briefings, by the way, are going to be in figures, so you make it a lot easy for us to be able to do so. One of the issues too that we think would like to have a briefing on is on the performance of an aspect of the budget that is service-wide vote and capital supplementation. This aspect of the budget, is growing increasingly. If you look at the figures for 2013, combined service-wide votes and capital supplementation have a figure of about 850 billion. None of our standing committees that is currently working is actually going to have any brief on this. Because this provision is handled by the Ministry of Finance, the Budget Office of the Federation, would like to have a brief. A lot of the times when we're in the floor trying to canvass support for the passage of the appropriation bill, a lot of the issues that generate a lot of concern have to do with this aspect of the budget. Some of the entries are abbreviated. Most of our colleagues don't know what they are. We always have to stand up spiritedly trying to explain, because dealing with you, we understand the logic behind this aspect of the budget, and we try to communicate that. So we also like to know what the performance of this aspect of the budget is so far. Service-wide votes, capital supplementation. I think that quite a number of issues that my colleagues have tried to, find out from me. This visit also provides us an excellent opportunity to trouble those issues. Because every matter that concerns the implementation of the budget, our colleagues in the House, look up to members of the Appropriations Committee to be able to provide them with all the answers. So we think that a visit of this nature, outside being informative, would also, put us on that excellent platform to be able to inform and to be able to, provide whatever missing links in terms of budget implementation. I think that after the briefing and after the presentations, of course, the procedure is that, as the presentation is going on, our colleagues, members of the committee, will be able to ask questions, raise issues, so that by the time we get out of here, we'll be getting out, stronger in terms of our understanding of the performance of the 2013 budget. I thank you, DG, and like you mentioned at the beginning, we're looking forward to a very worthy session with you. Thank you.
Let me start by saying I will do a short briefing on the implementation and the progress made so far have been changed. As I do this presentation, I will skip. Copies are going to be brought so that members can have. We'll see in front of you the budget as appropriated by your good selves for 2013. For overhead, 778.3 million was the appropriation. And so far, the releases have been at the level of 518.8 million, out of which 478 has been spent for under the overhead vote. Personnel, which I'd like to mention, is already under the IPs. On page 2, you will find the summary of the issues with respect to Personnel cost 662.8 million, and is centrally handled under the IPs by the Office of the Accountant General. In other words, they pay directly from there to the various people, and therefore it's we are on target. As I think, Chairman, you referred to it in your opening remarks, that under the recurrent spending, we generally are on target, and that's really the way it is with most countries. If you cannot meet your recurrent spending, that is where you know that there are really big issues. Because you must pay salaries to people you've employed. And that is the starting point. With respect to the overhead, which is the next one, materials with which you do the work, paper, toner, travels, and training. Those are primarily the components of the overhead. So in terms of performance, on this score for overhead, we have done about nearly 2/3 of what was appropriated for this purpose. So we are not 100% at the level of what was released, because clearly you manage it as things or as a need arises. As far as capital is concerned, which, Chairman, you laid emphasis on, we are one of those agencies of government that you would say are not big capital spending entities. We don't build roads or power or any of those, things. We have certain needs in order to enable the work of the office to progress. And to that extent, the capital, the amount that was appropriated for us was 50.2 million naira. So far, the releases were 21.5, but let me say that when we add the Q3, which Q3 will bring it to a bit more than that, the balance still expected is about 28.6 million for the rest of the year. Why on our side we are not really so concerned about the capital at this point is because the few things that we have capital items for are procurement, direct. You buy them from the suppliers of those items. But in the case of the budget office, the major things that we have, given the nature of what we do, heavy-duty digital photocopier is one of the items, and that alone is in the range of about 20 million. So what we've done is to wait until we have enough cumulative release for capital before embarking on it. We can't go to a shop to say, we want to buy photocopier, we have 10 million now, give it to us, and next quarter we'll give you the balance. That's not a good way. If we were a big capital spending agency, if we had 50 billion instead of 50 million, then you can be looking at really engaging those who are doing the work you are asking them to do, and as work is done, you pay them. Certificates are generated, you pay them. So this is the difference between offices like ours on the capital side and other offices. Now, we have done a lot of preparation. For example, the initial, what you normally do, the procurement, you advertise, you do all of those preparatory things. We've done most of those. What is left really is for us to activate it by saying we are now ready to procure this particular item, and therefore this is it. Just a second. All right, so you can start distributing this to members. So that's why on our own capital spending side, we haven't embarked upon it yet, because once we, now that we have sufficient release to enable us to do the procurement, the tendering process has been going on. Is virtually finished. And for us, it's a matter of just giving the go-ahead to whoever is the person doing it, and they go and procure and install, and we test run, and so on and so forth. As you see on the bottom of page 1, it says arrangements have been concluded with the trainers, those who are training up. That's why the human capital, the training opportunities, we had to delay some of it because the work we're doing on next year's budget is taking the time of so many of our key staff that we couldn't just allow them to go for those training opportunities when we have things on the ground. But I can assure members here, the honorable members, Right Honorable Chairman, that we are on target for getting this done. I believe those are the main things that one would like to say. If you look at page 2, it gives a kind of summary. Percentage releases on appropriation 67%, utilization 61% for overhead, and the balance 33%. For capital, it's also summarized there. Releases on appropriation, about 43% we have received by way of releases. But we're expecting to come, but we are not waiting for that before actually going on to implement what is there. One final point I want to make with respect to the budget office's budget is that you notice that this building has been under rehabilitation. It's not fully there. We only got 2 floors or 1 floor given to us last month, so we got our staff moved there. So we did not want to hurry things, bring things that we don't have a place. So we've programmed the procurement to be more or less in line with the progress with the rehabilitation of this building. I don't know, Chairman, maybe I should stop for discussion first before going to the main national budget implementation. Thank you, Chairman.
Not really under the personal cause, because I also think that government should encourage government. You also mentioned your faith in your promises and so on. I hope the lift is the elevator is inclusive. My attention is particularly drawn to the postage and courier services. The amount not so much, about 4 million and thereabout. Am I sure you are patronizing NIPOST, or is it a case where government will not patronize government institution? If you are not, it will be worrisome. Thank you.
I want to commend the Director General for your presentation. And on the face of it, I have one or few remarks to make. On the overhead and the capital expenditure, my observation is that the rate at which overhead releases are done, the rate is faster than is being done for the capital projects. And that will be, if my remark is anything to rely on, will be a cue from all the MDAs. That will be what we will see from all the MDAs, if we are seeing that here, from the mother or the supervising ministry, so to say. The overhead releases as at third quarter. The third quarter following the timeline. The standard should have been 75% if things are normal. Things are normal. And in normal way. The releases should have been 75% as at end of third quarter. For the overhead, it's only 66%. 66.6. Beautiful. Going down the line, looking at the capital, it's only 43, which is 21.6%, 21.6 million, which the standard should have been 38 million in normal condition. Why is this so? And will I be right to take a cue to say this is what we are going to see in other MDAs? Is that right? Thank you.
Looking at the overhead, does the overhead picture include or exclude the overheads? In terms of Q3, is Q3 part of the overhead that you presented? Because you had indicated that, the capital may not have included Q3. And if it has not, and next week we are getting into Q4, what is the real fate of the releases for Q3 if your presentation doesn't include Q3 for capital? Thank you.
The overhead component. Mr. Chairman, I find it difficult to comprehend what he has on paper here. Ordinarily, one would have expected that releases are made based on corresponding expenditure. But what you have on paper here is that you have releases that far outweigh the expenditure that has been incurred by the budget office. I don't know whether that is their pattern of preparation of budget, but otherwise, we see situations where, for instance, like somebody mentioned, capital projects that are completed are not even paid for. But here's a situation where you have expenditure which is less than amount of money that is being released to the budget office. How do you explain that? Thank you very much.
The capital portion of the budget. Because from the reason you gave, one of the reasons, you said you are waiting for the balance of the capital portion of the budget before you start procuring the capital portion of the budget. So in the event, if you do not get or do not receive the remaining balance of this 58% up to the end of the year, what will be the pay of the capital portion of the budget? And as the office of the budget office of the Federation, do you expect our MDAs also to wait until they get 100% release before they start implementing the budget? That's my question.
I assure you that we do. We utilize not just NIPOS, we also utilize other Nigeria-based Nigerian companies that specialize in delivery of mail services. So you can rest assured that this is what we do in the budget office, and we've also encouraged other MDAs to do the same in some of the sessions we had with them. The question about overhead releases faster than capital, and to explain why that is the case. Maybe I didn't say it very clearly when I made my presentation, but what I said was that you normally start with your personnel cost and make sure you can pay people that you've engaged to work for you. In the second order of business, the tools with which they should do the work, you equally provide. Which is why if you look at the aggregate of overhead in the budget, it's about 239 billion for 2013 to 39,240, which in percentage terms is about 5 or 6%. So the point I'm trying to make is not so much that the amount is such and such. It is the fact that the flow of work, if for example we pay people in the office, they have no paper to work with, there's no toner, there's no ink, they will not be doing anything. So we try to link the overhead vote somewhat to the people you are engaging to do some kind of work. So that's the reason that after personnel you have overhead in terms of prioritization of giving resources to the work. For capital, unfortunately, recall that in the past we didn't have as much deviation as we have had in the last 2 years, when resources were 100% available in line with the budget. If that is the case, or in those earlier times when there was no deviation, we released everything, which was why we were getting what we call unspent balances. Those things that MPs couldn't use for capital, that they return to the treasury at the end of the year. In this instance, because of the shortfall in revenues to government, the big one that you hear about is oil. Of course, we all know about that. It's on the pages of the newspaper. That's the reason we've not been able to match the capital release with what you're having in terms of percentage with the others. But besides oil, I want to also use the opportunity to mention that we have been short with respect to some non-oil items. One of the big areas is the policy change we made with agriculture, where we put a very high tariff, 110% effective duty rate on importation of rice, as an example. This has discouraged a lot of importation of rice, and we are glad, actually, when we look at how much we are getting in terms of production that has been registered in states like Kano, Kebbi, Jigawa, and so on. It's been very encouraging. 1.3 million tons of rice produced in dry season farming compared to 300,000, 400,000 of paddy that we had in the past. So it's working. But that is at the level of diversifying the economy. But on the revenue side, which is what hits us, people are not importing as much rice as they used to do. And therefore, the duty we can collect on this is lower. So, but you have to balance the two. For us, we want a long-term developmental strategy that will reduce our dependency on foreign imports. But this is the other side of it. And then you have some of the IGRs that have also not materialized. So that's the reason that we have. But oil is the biggest source of the shortfall in revenue. And that's the reason that you have this. With respect to the question that was raised on the third quarter, let me correct myself. The actual figure that you have for capital is for the 3 quarters. I thought it's just been attention was drawn to it that this figure was not updated. It's been updated, and that's the figure also for capital for the budget office. We tend to subject ourselves to the same discipline as for other MDAs. Otherwise, we could have said, let's favor the budget office and give us 100%, which will not be fair to others. Now, for overhead, again, just to make a slight correction, you know, overhead is given, you release the instrument every quarter. But what the cash backing that we get is on a monthly basis. So the September cash backing for the overhead, when you include it, it will actually raise it to 75%. So the honorable member who raised that point is very correct. What has happened there is that the figure you have is up to August for overhead, because that's what we have received. But we've now finalized the September. So very soon now, that will hit the account to bring it fully to 75%, 3 quarters of the year, as you correctly observed. One other question was about the releases being higher than utilization. Yes, we are not spending as fast. We will not say just because it's been released to us. I mentioned the example of training. But I delayed my staff going for some of, that's part of the overhead. I delayed some of them going for training because the work on 2014 budget is we've been really very busy with it. So I told them to hold off. The training opportunity will be there, but let's do first things first. So I wanted to clarify that. So when you see that we have some balances in the overhead, is simply because by right or by the budget it's been released into the account, but the actual spending of it is not 100%. And there's no account that you can manage in that way, real time, that at the very minute you are speaking, all the amount that is available is spent. When my staff come to me to say they need more toners of paper, that is when we say, okay, it's approved, go ahead and spend that extra amount of money. Then the other question I have here, that if it turns out that we don't have the full capital release before December, what will be the and whether this is what other agencies will do. Now, in our case, I can just clarify to you that having received up to the minimum needed to go and procure the equipment that we need, which is about 20 million or thereabouts, we will go ahead and do it now. So whatever happens going forward will not stunt, but I do I'm optimistic that we will be able to have, because fourth quarter release will still come. And when we receive that, in the case of the project office, we will proceed. Even the other MDAs, because they are contractors who are building roads and whatever they are doing, what they typically do is generate certificates, and we encourage them to do so once the procurement process has been properly conducted. So when the time comes for them to have payments made based on the certificate, just pay. So it really shouldn't be a big source of concern to us. In the budget office, in the case of budget office, it's not an issue at all. Chairman, I think I covered the
third quarter. What you have as percentage release of capital is about just 43% instead of 75%. Does this, tell us something about what is happening to the funding of the budget, the capital budget, holistically? I mean, does it? It's in fairness to you, you've said here that you don't try to say that because you are the one that does the releases, then release 100% for budget office. So if it's at the end of the third quarter, you have 43% capital release. What does this tell us? We can start from this point and go into the other presentations. Thank you.
You will see it within this presentation. At different forums, whether it's based on news analysis or things of that type. But essentially what we're looking at here for most regions of the world, most big economies of the world, is a very severe challenge with respect to GDP performance. And you see it on a daily basis when people report on performance. They talk of unemployment, they talk of other challenges. In fact, this morning when I was with one of your members who visited, what we saw was surprising, that France was that public debt in case of France was going to be 91.5%. 91.5% of their GDP. If you take the equivalent in the case of Nigeria, our GDP is about 300 and something. If we were to say our national debt is going to be nearly $300 billion, I mean, you will be very alarmed. That gives you, I only give that analogy in order to get a sense of the very tough situation the global economy currently undergoing. And we are a part of it. And because we are a part of it, it's affecting a lot of things as far as we are concerned. On slide 2, you will see that table there, which essentially talks about the growth forecast for many countries as listed here. Luckily, in the case of Africa, maybe because we started from a smaller base, but also the reforms, you have a positive 5.1% as projected. You look at the euro area, it's a negative. USA is positive. Japan beginning to grow, etc. Now, what you are looking at here, the next slide, you look at the Nigerian situation as currently forecast. Our GDP is regarded currently as the fastest growing in the continent and faster than many, many other regions of the world. And this is the gross domestic product growth. For 2013, we are looking at 6.5% forecast, although the IMF thinks we'll do better at 7.2%, but we are cautious enough to look at about 6.5% of GDP growth for 2013. As you probably heard in the news, the growth slowed to 6.18% in the second quarter, from 6.58 in the first quarter. But the harvest and these other activities that generally come around the third and fourth quarters would tend to suggest that we should be able to have an average of about 6.5 or thereabouts for the year. So we'll see what eventually comes up. Exchange rates, the CBN 155 to 160 has been their band, and this is what we more or less seen. Occasionally it's gone above the 160 naira to the dollar range or level, but this has been the general thrust. Inflation has been coming down. I say all of this, external reserves about 45.7 billion now, etc., etc. Now, the point I'm making here is when you are looking at the economic performance of a nation, you must set the backdrop against it because it affects so many things in the economy, whether you're looking at tax receipts and so on and so forth. In spite of this, we do see that there are certain possibilities that we need to be aware of and to look out for. One of them is the possible threat to the medium-term outlook. Medium-term, not very long, in fact, including where we are today, 2014, nearly around the corner. In the sense that the non-conventional oil that has been discovered in parts of the world is something we cannot ignore, is there, and the US is already exploiting this. The shale oil and gas has been in the news for a long time. US crude oil production has been rising, recovering from where it was, and that in itself is a challenge for us. The International Energy Agency forecasts that by 2030, the USA would be a net exporter of oil, and that is a worrying sum because at this time, US is consuming about 18, 19, 20 million barrels per day, and they only produce about 7, 8. So if they are going to ramp up production to the level of being a net exporter, then you can see the dangers that we are talking about and the threat to the medium-term outlook. Bonny Light has been fairly good. It's still well over 100. Well, it's a little over $100 per barrel. It had reached 118 at some point, but come down. If you look at the next slide, you will see this. This is a very telling slide, slide 5, where you look at the imports of crude oil from Nigeria by the United States. It's been on the downward trend, and it essentially underscores what I just mentioned, that they are becoming more and more self-sufficient, and therefore are reducing importation from Nigeria and other countries, by the way, not just Nigeria. Quickly, the next slide, looking at some of the potential areas of challenge that we might see in the economy. And these include, for example, the loss of crude oil production that we've experienced in the last it's been going on for the last 2 years plus, actually beyond 2 years, the last several years, but it became very, very high last year and intensified the first half of this year. The estimated loss in the first half was close to 400,000 barrels per day, about 370,000 barrels per day of lost production. I want to use this opportunity to explain that when we talk about a loss of production, or we are losing 400,000 barrels per day, we don't mean that people are physically carrying. this volume of oil away and people not noticing. That's not the case. What it means is that when the pipelines are attacked or there is some problem with it, production facilities are shut down because you don't want to have oil throughput through a pipeline that has been punctured and is leaking all over the place. So that is the reason. So what you don't get, what we don't in the treasury, money that does not, oil that doesn't translate into money for the treasury, we regard it as a loss. That's why it is close to 400,000 barrels per day. Pipeline vandalization, criminals who from the pipeline. The other aspect is the insecurity that you witness in parts of the country. People may not really tie this fully to the economic performance, but as a macro-fiscal economist, I can tell you the links are very clear. Production in agriculture in some parts of the country have suffered. Commercial activities have reduced significantly. And when you look at the revenue dimension, FRS has told us in their reporting to us that they've not been able to operate and collect taxes in some of the jurisdictions that they normally cover. And that tells you that there is that link clearly between areas of security or insecurity and the performance of the economy. In the next slide, very briefly, what government is trying to do on all of this. The first one has been that we'll be familiar with the Governor Dua committee, which consists of the various governors of the region, Niger Delta, all the way up to Ondo State. There are members of the committee. Minister of Petroleum is a member. CMA, Minister of Finance, is a member. I am a member. And the security chiefs are also part of that committee. To identify what apparently has been going on, hone in, and then to come up with some proposal on how to solve the problem. And that, I believe, has been going on for some last couple of months, I would say. But over and above that, they've been able to identify some of the sources of problem, and the resources that are needed to fix this were identified by the various security services. These were put together, and I believe we've seen some impact, because we saw that the Trans-Niger pipeline, which was the biggest of these facilities, was repaired, and I think only yesterday or so I heard that there was some challenge with some other aspect of it. But we have heard that they had restored a great deal of the production. So hopefully we should be able to have, better inflow of resources arising from the efforts of the committee. Now, on the side of diversification, the non-oil tax campaign has been ongoing with respect to the entity that was engaged, the McKinsey, which worked with both South Africa first and then Angola to try to increase the level of taxes that can be collected, and those have produced results in those countries. We've engaged them now, and work is an advanced stage for them to move forward. Economic diversification is important, as I referred to earlier. The agriculture, thank God we have that. It employs close to 70% of the population in some way or another. Some of it is full-time, some of it is part-time or seasonal. But that is doing relatively well with the transformation agenda on the agri. So we are optimistic that with this and the supporting fiscal policy measures for solid minerals, for steel sector and so on, that we'll be able to push that level of diversification. The work being done on the structural side, which you will be familiar with, electricity privatization and those elements, are beginning to show results and to energize. Once you have electricity change in terms of volume of production and distribution, transmission and utilization, I think that the industrial sector, the private sector, will also get to do much better than they're currently doing. Next slide. It looks on the revenue side as far as these matters are concerned. And as I indicated already, there have been shortfalls in various categories. Specifically, oil, as I said, is done. We've had some big challenge in that area. IGR is also in that same category. And then you're looking at the unspent balance, the amount we have thought we'll get. I think towards the end of the year, when the fourth quarter revenue flows came in, it already were experiencing, this